There was a time when I used to count the seconds until he came home. Back then, our apartment was small, our furniture mismatched, and our dreams bigger than the sky. We would sit on the kitchen floor eating takeout, laughing about nothing, touching without thinking. He used to reach for me in his sleep. I used to believe that kind of love was unbreakable. I don't know when it changed. Maybe it was after the children were born. Maybe it was when his business started growing. Maybe it was when life became more about responsibilities than romance. He didn't become cruel. He didn't become cold. He just became distant. He worked longer hours. He spoke less at dinner. When I told him about my day, he would nod, distracted, eyes still on his phone or lost in thought. He never forgot birthdays, never stopped providing, never raised his voice, but he stopped seeing me. And I stopped feeling seen. Loneliness inside a marriage is a strange thing. It's not loud, it's quiet. It creeps in slowly, like winter settling into your bones. You tell yourself it's just a phase. You tell yourself all couples go through this. You tell yourself to be grateful. But I wanted to feel wanted again. That's when I met Daniel. He was new at the marketing firm where I had started working part-time. He was easy to talk to, too easy. He noticed when I changed my hair. He remembered small details about my stories. When he looked at me, I felt visible, like I existed beyond being a wife and a mother. It started innocently. Coffee breaks, shared jokes, messages that felt harmless, then compliments, then lingering touches. The first time he held my hand, I didn't pull away. I knew I should have. I knew exactly what line I was stepping over. But in that moment, I chose the warmth of attention over the quiet emptiness waiting for me at home. The affair itself was not passionate or dramatic like in movies. It was messy, secretive, filled with guilt. Every time I left the house with an excuse, my heart pounded with both excitement and shame. I would come home and see my husband sitting at the dining table, reviewing paperwork. He would look up and offer a tired smile, and something inside me would twist. He never suspected me. Or maybe he did, and I was too selfish to notice. The night everything shattered was an ordinary Tuesday. Daniel had come over while my husband was supposedly on a late business trip. We were careless, laughing too loudly, living inside the illusion that we were entitled to this stolen happiness. Then I heard the front door open. The sound still echoes in my mind. My blood froze, Daniel's face drained of color. There were no words, just panic. My husband stood in the doorway of the living room. He didn't shout, he didn't run toward us, he just stood there. His eyes moved from Daniel to me, and in that single glance I saw something break. Daniel mumbled something and rushed past him. My husband didn't try to stop him, didn't even move aside quickly. He simply stepped back, as if the entire scene was beneath confrontation. When the door closed, the house became suffocatingly silent. I opened my mouth, ready with apologies, explanations, lies. I didn't even know which one I was going to use. But he spoke first. "I see," he said softly. That was it. No anger, no accusations, no questions, just 2 words. He walked past me into the bedroom. I followed, trembling, waiting for the explosion, waiting for him to throw something, to scream, to demand answers. Instead, he took off his jacket, folded it carefully, and placed it on the chair. Then he looked at me. There were tears in his eyes, but they didn't fall. "I understand," he added quietly. Understand what? Why? How? His calmness was unbearable. "I'm sorry," I whispered, my voice breaking. He nodded once. Okay, as if I had spilled wine on the carpet, as if I hadn't just shattered our marriage. That night, he slept on his side of the bed, not touching me, and for the first time in years, I realized something terrifying. His silence wasn't forgiveness. It was the beginning of something far worse. The next morning, I expected chaos. I expected packed bags, divorce papers, shouting, accusations. Instead, he woke up at his usual time. He showered, shaved, dressed for work. When I walked into the kitchen, my hands trembling, he was already making coffee. He poured a cup for me the way he always had, 2 sugars, a little milk, and placed it on the table. "Thank you," I whispered, unsure if I even deserved the courtesy of breath in that house. He nodded politely. That was the moment I realized this wasn't going to be a storm. It was going to be winter. He never mentioned Daniel again. Not that day, not the next, not ever. He didn't ask questions. He didn't demand details. He didn't check my phone or follow me. He didn't punish me with insults. He simply withdrew. At night, he lay beside me like a statue carved from stone. His body didn't move toward mine, not even accidentally. If our hands brushed, he would gently shift away. It wasn't cruel, it wasn't dramatic, it was deliberate. The first week, I cried every night. I tried to talk to him. "Please yell at me." I begged once, "Please say something." He looked at me calmly. What would yelling fix? I made a mistake. I sobbed. "Yes," he said quietly, "you did." There was no hatred in his voice, and somehow that made it worse. The affair ended immediately. I called Daniel and told him never to contact me again. He tried to argue, but I felt nothing now, only disgust at myself. What had felt thrilling before now looked cheap and meaningless, but ending it didn't undo anything. Days turned into months. He still paid the bills, still attended school meetings, still fixed things around the house. In public, he held the image of a devoted husband. At family gatherings, he stood beside me, polite and composed. If anyone looked closely, they might have noticed he never reached for my hand. At night, the bed felt like a border between two countries at war. On our anniversary that year, I planned a dinner. I cooked his favorite dishes, lit candles, wore the dress he once said made me look beautiful. When he came home, he paused at the doorway, taking in the scene. "You didn't have to do this," he said. I wanted to. I replied, my heart racing. We ate in near silence. I reached across the table, my fingers trembling as they moved toward his. He didn't pull away harshly. He just didn't respond. After dinner, I stood in front of him, close enough to feel the warmth of his body. "I miss you." I whispered. He looked at me for a long moment. "I'm here," he said, but he wasn't, not really. Years passed like that. 5 years, 10 years. Our children grew taller. Our hair grew thinner. Life moved forward, but we remained frozen in that Tuesday night. I apologized in every way I knew how, letters, therapy suggestions, tearful confessions. "I forgive you," he would say every time. But forgiveness, I learned, is not the same as restoration. He stopped calling me by pet names, stopped complimenting me, stopped sharing his inner thoughts. I became his roommate, the mother of his children, the woman who cooked and cleaned and attended events beside him. But not his wife. One winter evening, about 8 years after he caught me, I reached for him in the dark, unable to bear the emptiness any longer. He gently removed my hand from his chest, not angrily, not roughly, just firmly. "Please," I whispered. He sighed softly, staring at the ceiling. "I can't," he said. "Why?" My voice cracked. "Because when I touch you," he answered after a long silence. "I remember." Those words settled into my bones. He never raised his voice, never humiliated me, never sought revenge in the ways I feared. Instead, he chose dignity. He chose silence. He chose to stay, but he took his heart with him. The world saw a stable marriage. But inside our walls, I lived with the quiet consequences of one selfish choice. And slowly, painfully, I began to understand. Anger burns fast. But indifference lasts forever. 18 years is a long time to live beside someone who no longer reaches for you. By then, our children were adults. The house that once echoed with noise and chaos had grown quiet. Their rooms were tidy, untouched for months at a time, like small museums of a life that had already moved on. It was just the two of us again. Ironically, we had returned to where we began, a couple alone in a quiet house. But this time the silence was different. He had aged gently, silver threaded through his hair, fine lines framed his eyes. He still carried himself with the same calm composure, the same quiet dignity that had both protected and punished me for nearly 2 decades. He had never cheated back, never humiliated me, never weaponized my mistake in arguments. He simply erased me from the part of himself that felt deeply. and I had spent 18 years trying to find my way back into a heart that had quietly closed its doors. Sometimes I would watch him from the kitchen as he read the newspaper or watered the plants outside. He moved peacefully, as if he had made his terms with life. I, however, lived with a weight that never lifted. Guilt does not fade with time. It matures, it deepens, it becomes part of your breathing. On our 25th wedding anniversary, I decided I couldn't survive another year of distance. I wrote him a letter, not an apology. I had written dozens of those before. This one was different. It was honest. I told him how selfish I had been, how lonely I had felt, but how I should have fought for us instead of escaping. I admitted that the affair had been shallow, temporary, meaningless compared to the depth of what we once had. I told him I had spent 18 years learning the true cost of betrayal, and at the end I wrote, "If there is even a crack in the ice, I am willing to stand in the cold until it melts." That night, I left the letter on his desk. He read it slowly. I watched from the doorway, my heart pounding like a frightened girl waiting for judgment. When he finished, he folded it carefully and placed it beside him. "Thank you," he said. My chest tightened. "That's all." He looked up at me, then really looked at me, and for the first time in years, I saw something flicker behind his steady eyes. "I forgave you a long time ago," he said quietly. "Then why are we still like this?" My voice trembled. He leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly, "Because forgiveness isn't the same as forgetting." The words settled heavily between us. "You didn't just break my trust," he continued. "You changed something inside me. That night I realized I could survive without needing you." Tears burned my eyes. "I never wanted to make you feel that way. I know," he said gently, "and that's the tragedy." There was no cruelty in his tone. No bitterness, only truth. "I stayed because of the children," he admitted, "and because once I loved you more than anything. But something froze in me that night. I didn't know how to thaw it." His voice cracked slightly on the last sentence. It was the first visible crack in 18 years. I stepped closer, kneeling beside his chair. "I'm still here," I whispered. "I never stopped loving you. I just didn't understand what love required until I almost destroyed it." He closed his eyes briefly, as if gathering strength. "When I touch you," he said softly, "I don't feel anger anymore. I feel loss, and I don't know how to separate the two." The honesty in his confession hurt more than any shouting ever could. For 18 years I had believed he was punishing me. Now I understood something worse. He had been protecting himself. The ice wasn't revenge, it was survival. And as I knelt there, holding the edge of his chair but not yet daring to hold his hand, I realized that rebuilding what we lost would require more than apologies. It would require patience, it would require humility, and perhaps, if time allowed, it would require one final act of grace from both of us. Life has a quiet way of humbling us. It was a mild autumn afternoon when he first collapsed. One moment he was trimming the hedges in the yard, steady and composed as always. The next he was on his knees, gripping his chest, his face drained of color. For 18 years, he had been the strong one, the controlled one, the unshakable one, and suddenly he looked fragile. The hospital room smelled of antiseptic and fear. Machines beeped softly beside his bed. The doctors spoke in calm, careful tones: heart complications, stress over time, things that build slowly and silently. Like resentment, like guilt, I stayed beside him every hour. I adjusted his blankets. I brought him water. I read to him when he was too tired to hold the book himself. For 18 years, he had not touched me. But now I was the one holding his hand. At first, his fingers lay still in mine, neither squeezing nor pulling away. Just resting there, as if uncertain whether they belonged. Days passed, then weeks. He grew thinner. Weaker, and something inside me shifted. I wasn't caring for him out of obligation. I wasn't trying to earn forgiveness anymore. I was simply loving him, purely, quietly, without expectation. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the hospital room in gold, he stirred and looked at me for a long time. "You're tired," he murmured. "I'm not going anywhere." I replied softly. A faint smile touched his lips. You stayed. I always stayed. He studied my face as if searching for something he had misplaced long ago. For years, I had imagined this moment differently. I thought if he ever softened, it would feel victorious, like I had finally broken through the wall. But there was no victory here, only tenderness, only time running out. That night, as I adjusted his pillow, I felt it. A gentle pressure, his fingers curling weakly around mine, 18 years, 18 winters, and finally warmth. My breath caught. I looked at him, afraid to move, afraid it wasn't real. I don't remember how to do this. He whispered, his voice fragile. Do what? I asked, tears already forming, love you without remembering the pain. My heart broke and healed in the same second. You don't have to forget, I said quietly. We can love each other with the cracks. He closed his eyes, and a single tear slipped down his temple. I never stopped loving you, he admitted. I just didn't know how to be your husband again after that night. So I chose distance. It felt safer. His words were not bitter. They were honest. I deserved your anger, I whispered, not your silence. He gave the faintest shake of his head. Anger would have destroyed us. Silence kept us standing, and he was right. His revenge had never been cruelty. It had been dignity. He refused to become a man consumed by rage. He refused to humiliate me or himself. Instead, he made me live with the weight of what I had done, not through punishment, but through absence. And that absence had taught me everything. In the days that followed, he grew quieter. We spoke less, but said more with our eyes than we ever had with words. One early morning, as pale light filtered through the curtains, he looked at me again, not as a roommate, not as a stranger. As his wife, come here, he whispered. I leaned closer, and for the first time in 18 years, he lifted his hand to my face. His touch was weak, trembling, but intentional. I forgive you, he said again, but this time it felt different. Not like a statement, like a release. His thumb brushed my cheek gently. Love is fragile, he murmured. Once cracked, it never looks the same, but it can still hold. Those were the last clear words he spoke before sleep carried him somewhere I could not follow. He didn't leave this world angry. He left it peaceful, and I remained carrying both his forgiveness and the quiet lesson of his life. The sweetest revenge was never about hurting me. It was about showing me what loyalty truly meant, and making sure I lived long enough to understand it.